This video is sponsored by Lighter Creative. More about them later on. What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's time for another episode of the best armies in Warhammer 40k. Weekly video series where we go through undefeated results from the last weekend and talk about what's currently winning. This week has thrown us a couple of curveballs, and that's even with some large events going down, including things like the California Cup 25, as well as the Show Me Showdown. Both large major level events with over 100 players. So let's dive into this metagame breakdown and talk about what's currently winning. And the first thing we notice is that the last couple of weeks of development, where we've been seeing factions like Tau Empire and Aeldari do relatively well, doesn't seem to be the case for this week. A little bit of an outlier. Instead, we have Space Marines doing incredibly well with multiple different sub-factions taking down GTs. The California Cup 25 was won by Space Wolves, as well as the Safeties Off Fat Cap for Charity Iron Man event. That means it's a one-day event, and that was won by a very spicy Space Wolves list. We'll talk about both of those in this episode. Raven Guard took down the Waterloo Games and Open Pusella War Games. Adeptus Custodes coming back out of the woodwork with, again, two undefeated results. That's both at Nemesis 40k Fall and Exterminatus 025M3. In addition to that, we have Necrons taking down BolterCon 2025, as well as Exterminatus. Those are both with Awakened Dynasty lists. The Boise Diamond series was won by Drukhari, who also took down the Warpstorm GT. Those are both Spectacle of Spite lists, taking after the top placing list from World Championships, which kind of wowed everyone. A Spectacle of Spite list, which we'll be talking about here. Du Bois GT Rochester was a large GT. It only ran 5 rounds, but had several players, and that means it's going to come down to 3 undefeateds here. That includes Adeptus Mechanicus, who also tied for first place at the Walkmaster 5. That means an XO at 1 result with a natural 85-85 draw at the end, which is crazy. That was a draw with Death Guard, who also went 7-0 for an undefeated record and winning the Show Me Showdown, one of the other larger majors of the weekend. Blood Angels, going back to those Space Marine factions, doing well at Athens Warlord 2. Black Templars at GUTI Majestic Beasties 5. Some more results from Du Bois Rochester. That includes Astra Militarum and Tau Empire. Adepta Sororitas won Geekfest Arcs of Fire. Aeldari, the previous metagame frontrunner, showing up here with 1 win from the 40k Iron Man. And last but certainly not least, Chaos Demons coming in second place at Open Pusella War Games. That was with a undefeated record. There were 2 5-0s for that event. The Radcon Major also saw a smorgasbord of bizarre lists go undefeated. This includes World Eaters, Leagues of Votann, and Chaos Space Marines, and with some pretty bizarre detachments too, and we'll be talking about those lists at the end of the video. So, incredibly diverse metagame for this week, and let's talk about these lists right after a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Lighter Creative, and in addition to making a wide selection of laser-cut terrain, Lighter Creative has also branched out into battle mats and wants me to showcase to you their new battle mat style. The folks over at Lighter Creative have been hard at work developing a new material for tabletop gaming mats. We've seen neoprene mats and we've seen vinyl mats, but this is a slip-resistant rubberized vinyl that's incredibly flexible and incredibly precise. The nice thing that allows Lighter Creative to do is actually put grid lines on their mat. Now, obviously, we've seen these before in things like vinyl mats. The big benefit of these over neoprene is that this material doesn't stretch like neoprene does. So you actually get accurate sizes on all your map cuts. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus here, but I did live stream an event recently where the mat on the championship table was just 59 inches long, which is a full inch too short. That doesn't happen with this style of vinyl terrain, and Lighter Creative has this new material that's crease resistant, has an anti-tear backing, and is actually slightly tacky, so it prevents your models and terrain from moving around. Now, we've talked about them in the past, but the grid lines and pre-placed objective markers on these mats are a life changer. They make it extremely easy to set up your boards, as well as to determine where things like deployment zones, table quarters, different areas of the battlefield for zone control are. We play a lot of Tabletop Simulator here on the channel, and these basically are like playing Tabletop Simulator, but in real life. So check out their mats, as well as their selection of laser-cut terrain features in the links in the video description. And huge thanks to Lighter Creative for sponsoring this video. And now, back to the content. So starting with Space Wolves, one of our metagame frontrunners today, we're going to talk about both lists, starting with one of the largest events of the weekend, the California Cup 25. This was won by Michael Mann, going 7-0 with the faction, playing a Stormlance Task Force, one of the more popular varieties of Space Wolves. This included Arjack Rockfist, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, a Combi Lieutenant, Logan Grimnar, a Wolf Priest with Portents of Wisdom to grant reroll advance rolls for the unit. Obviously, in Stormlance Task Force, you can advance and charge innately, which means getting reroll advance rolls is a meaningful improvement in your threat range. We have a standard Intercessor squad to hold down the backline, a Scout squad for some utility, one unit of Thunderwolf Cavalry, a little bit lower than we typically see. However, we are going all in on other specialist Space Wolf infantry. This includes a Wolfguard Headtaker squad with paired Mastercrafted Power Weapons, so 6 2-damage melee attacks each on those. They are going to be sourcing +1 to wound from the Wolf Priest attaching in, so it gives them a little bit of a leg up in terms of their threat range with that reroll advance roll, and then they have an insane number of melee attacks, all with +1 to wound. I think it ends up being 41 2-damage melee attacks, if I remember correctly. We then have 2 units of Wolfguard Terminators, 1 unit of 5 and 1 unit of 10. Oftentimes what we'll see is the unit of 10 be a bodyguard for Arjank Rockfist. Well, we'll see Logan Grimnar. We're rocking around with the smaller unit. That Arjank Rockfist unit is an incredibly strong hammer blow unit. Obviously, Arjank is one of the higher damage output special characters in the faction, and so being able to deliver him and consistently keep him in melee for multiple turns by soaking damage on the Terminators over the course of several turns of engagement means that Arjank is constantly going to be dealing damage, and with the ability to fall back and charge from Stormlance Task Force, it lets that unit stick in melee with even hard targets for a while and just constantly cycle charge into them in order to eventually kill them. Following that up, we also have 2 units of Wolfen with Storm Shields for some anti-vehicle and faster movement characteristics. Overall, pretty standard stuff. I think the one interesting thing about this build is that it's relatively light in terms of ranged attacks, so sometimes we see some backline shooting in this kind of build, and it's also light on the Thunderwolf Cavalry, so it doesn't have the same breadth of threat range as we see from other varieties of Space Wolves, especially Thunderwolf Cavalry Space Wolf lists. However, what it is going to do is just be able to bear down the center of the table incredibly consistently. There's not a lot of armies in the game that can efficiently deal with 15 Wolfguard Terminators. They have 4 wounds each. They're -1 to be wounded for most profiles, and then you get to follow that up with either the Thunderwolf Cavalry going in early to bully a flank, or you can use them to sort of follow up where the Wolfguard Terminators have already engaged. Similarly, you can do that with the other infantry as well. So the Wolfguard Terminators can, push in, use rampant ingresses and things to get themselves into melee. Then you can counterattack with the other infantry, the Wolfen and the Wolfguard Headtakers that don't necessarily want to expose themselves to enemy attacks that early. Now, from there, we also have another Space Wolf list that also did well this week. This was at the Safeties Off Fat Cap for Charity Iron Man, where Linton Rowan went 5-0 with, interestingly, a Saga of the Hunter detachment. Now, this is a very rarely seen detachment. If you attack an enemy unit that has either multiple Adeptus Astartes units engaging it, so you're ganging up on them, or you have more models than the defending unit, so if you're, for example, a 10-man squad fighting a 5-man squad, you're going to get the bonus. Then you get +1 to hit, and if you complete a Saga, you get +1 to wound as well. The Saga requires you to destroy 3 enemy units in melee to unlock that +1 to wound bonus. But the thing is, with larger squads, or with an MSU variety where you have lots of smaller units, like jump back intercessors, for example, little units that can run around, it's going to be relatively easy to unlock the ability of the detachment. And getting +1 to hit and wound on every single one of your melee attacks across all of your Space Wolf units is actually incredibly strong. So what are we taking in the list? First of all, it started with 3 Wolfguard Battle Leaders. None of these special characters whatsoever, simply the Battle Leaders themselves. One of them taking Fenrisian Grit for a 4+ Feel No Pain. The other one taking Swift Hunter to give his unit 7-inch Scout. Now, the Wolfguard Battle Leaders are incredible force multipliers. They give you reroll once they hit. They give you a sustain hits 1 ability as well. So they're basically giving you a 1-2 punch in terms of your output when they're talking about melee attacks. So a lot of your armies can be hitting on 2s thanks to the +1 to hit from the detachment ability, and then rerolling 1s with sustain hits 1, meaning that you are expecting more hits than you started with attacks. That's generally speaking going to be the math. We have then an Impulsor, 1 Infiltrator squad to hold down the backline, a Land Raider Redeemer to deliver some of this melee infantry, 3 units of 6 Wolfguard Headtakers. Now, all of these in this case are equipped with Storm Shields because we do need a little bit of additional resilience. Because we don't have the ability to advance and charge in this detachment, we do need a little bit more resilience in case we do have to stay out in the open for a turn, essentially. We have 2 units of Wolf Scouts. This is the new Wolf Scout unit, the new datasheet that is coming out with the Fenrisian Wolf attached. These guys are a little bit punchier than standard Scouts or other Phobos infantry. They have a high base attack volume, 4 base melee attacks, and the access to +1 to wound as well. Naturally, if they attack something that is all by itself, meaning that these Wolf Scouts, even before you unlock your Saga, are going to be getting +1 to hit, by themselves against an enemy if they both engage onto it, or it's a smaller unit. Unfortunately, the Wolf Scouts themselves are actually 6 models, so if they attack into a 5-model enemy squad, they'll actually be outnumbering it and get the +1 to hit bonus. And then, if that unit is not near other friendlies, you're going to get +1 to wound on top of that. So these guys are going to be hitting and wounding on 2s. Makes them a very strong inclusion in this detachment specifically, which is kind of cool. From there, we also just have 3 units of Wolfen with Storm Shields. The +1 to wound from the Saga bonus, if you're able to get that, because these are 10-man squads, which is much more reliable to get the outnumbering bonus on these guys, definitely makes up for the fact that they are typically anti-monster, anti-vehicle, so they want to be hitting big stuff, but sometimes they do get stuck on infantry squads, especially high-toughness non-vehicle stuff. Does tend to be a bit of a sandbag for them. However, if you have a +1 to wound effect, in addition to +1 to hit, plus they have a death totem, so they are naturally rerolling their 1s, they don't necessarily have that weakness. So if these guys come in the late game, after, for example, you have already committed with 2 units of Wolfguard Headtakers inside a Land Raider, 1 unit in an Impulsor that's about to scout, thanks to Swift Hunter, and the 2 units of Wolf Scouts, you already have a pretty solid chance of completing the full version of the Saga of the Hunter ability, and then you get descended on by these 3 units of Wolf and with Storm Shields that are getting that +1 to hit and wound, basically converting all their attacks, and then doing some serious damage. Incredibly creative build, using the new Wolf Scout datasheet, which honestly, I thought didn't look particularly good, but it does make sense that in Saga of the Hunter specifically, because they are essentially going to give themselves the second part of the detachment ability from the early game, and they are forward operators, so they can get into melee that early, it does make total sense that you would give them a go, and it seems like they were incredibly effective taking down a whole GT. Now with that, we're going to hop over to the winner of the Open Pusela War Games 2025. This is Polito Releno, who is playing Shadowmark Talon. Now, generally speaking, this is a normal Shadowmark Talon build. It's got the 2 units of Vanguard Veterans, it's got some Scouts, it has 3 units of Inceptors, that's 2 with Assault Bolters, 1 with Plasma Exterminators that we can up down on turn 1. It is only 1 Centurion Devastator squad in this case, opening up some space for some additional utility, in this case 3 units of Jump Pack Assault Intercessors, as well as all of those Inceptors and Scouts, so we have a ton of scoring potential, but the standard allotment of characters, Aethan Sean, who has been updated, by the way, I've learned recently, he was buffed a little bit in the recent balance update or Space Marine Faction Pack update, where he actually gained the ability to optionally not use his reroll charges ability. So the weird thing about Aethan Sean's reroll charges is that if you target an enemy unit with it, anything that charges within 12 inches of that enemy unit must charge. It's required. And because Aethan previously was required to choose a target for his ability, sometimes he could mess up your charge phase in a really bad way. However, now he just can choose not to use it. You do have to select that in your command phase, so you don't necessarily know about what else is going on over the rest of your turn, but it is a little bit of a quality of life change. I don't know why they didn't just change his ability to say reroll charges targeting an enemy unit. I don't know why it's got this weird charge requirement clause on it, but at least it's slightly less degenerate than it was previously in the Raven Guard player's favor, obviously. This is better for Raven Guard. In addition to that, we have the captain with Hunter's Instinct, so he can jump in on turn 1. We have a combi lieutenant with Corono Susurrant for the command point tax, as well as Cave and Trike. So pretty standard stuff from Raven Guard this week. Now let's hop into Adeptus Custodes. And in fact, we haven't talked about Adeptus Custodes in quite a bit on this this series. So I think what we're going to do is actually talk about both of the lists that went undefeated this week. Now, the first one was in the Nemesis 40k Fall GT. This was won by Jorgen Goulet, who was playing Lines of the Emperor, kind of a more standard build that we would expect to see. This includes a Blade Champion with Superior Creation, so he can respawn when killed. We have a Shield Captain in Alaris Terminator armor. That guy has Admata Mortis and a Castellan Axe, the classic combination, so he can improve his AP, his strength, his damage. He can hit like an absolute Mack truck for relatively inexpensive. And we have a Dawn Eagle Jetbike Shield Captain with Fierce Conqueror. This gives him additional attacks based on the number of enemy units within 6 inches of him, which typically ends up being kind of a high number because he usually just tries to full send into a very dangerous spot and then use his once per game fight and then move ability to move at the end of the fight phase, hide behind a train feature, and then Gilded Champion to turn it on and try to do it again. So he can play very aggressively. We then have a second Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike for largely the same reason, although obviously with a little less damage output because he doesn't have that enhancement. Plus, interestingly, Trajan Valoris, which is cool. We have 3 units of Custodian Guard alongside a unit of 2 Alaris Custodians, 2 units of 2 Virtus Praetors in order to attach in the 2 Dawn Eagle Jetbike Shield Captains, 3 Witch Seekers, a Calidus Assassin, and Inquisitor Kyria Draxus. So we do have an attachment for one of those Custodian Guard squads. All of them, I should note, are equipped with spears. None of them are going to be taking the shields in this case. Then we also have an attachment for the Blade Champion, and we have the third one to attach Trajan Valoris. Now this is honestly, it's one of my favorite ways to put Trajan Valoris on the table. He's such a house when you attach him into a Custodian Guard squad, because as soon as you give his potentially 12 3-damage melee attacks, full wound rerolls, and access to +1 to wound, he goes insane. This dude's fully capable of killing super heavies and knights and things by himself if you can set up the situation for it. So high risk, high reward, because you are putting Trajan Valoris in a non-warden protected unit, so he's a little bit easier to kill. However, once he gets into something, he hits like an absolute Mack truck. It's absolutely terrifying. Interesting thing about this list, and this is something we've kind of been seeing as we've been going through these lists, there's no shooting really at all. Besides the Kyria Draxus squad and a little bit of shooting from the Dawn Eagle jet bikes, this army is basically just going to try to MSU you out with a bunch of little individual custodian units. In addition to the Leech Seekers, we are also running a full 6 individual custodian units, all of them with characters. They can run around the board, get access to that Lines of the Emperor ability, and really rip stuff up. So pretty cool list. But is it as cool as our second one? This one coming from Exterminatus 025M3. This is Snorre Bugge, who was playing Talons of the Emperor, a detachment we haven't seen in quite a while, but for a while was actually considered the best detachment in Adeptus Custodes. Now, this is the one where you gain a bonus when you are nearby your Anathema Psychona units. So, your Sisters of Silence give your Adeptus Custodes a feel no pain against mortal wounds and psychic attacks, and the Adeptus Custodians give +1 to hit to Anathema Psychona units. They can sort of buff each other. And the stratagems inside this detachment are absolutely incredible. There's a number of extremely good ones that can dual target both Custodians and Anathema Psychona, one of each unit if you have both of them near each other, or they can target one or the other if you want to. This includes fall, back, shoot, and charge, +1 to wound against enemies below starting strength, or, most importantly, a flat 6-inch reactive move, which is incredible. So in this case, we're taking a Blade Champion with Radiant Mantle. That's -1 to be hit for the unit from all attacks, assuming that the attacking model is within 12 inches of you. So anything 13 inches or farther is going to be hitting normally. But as soon as you get too close, the Blade Champion's unit gets hard to hit. That you can attach that guy into a unit of Custodian Wardens, potentially give yourself -1 to hit and wound, which can be very difficult to deal with. We have another Blade Champion alongside a Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle jet bike with Aegis Protector. That's a once per turn damage blank. After you fail a save, you can turn it to damage 0, and then another unupgraded Dawn Eagle jet bike Shield Captain. Importantly, those guys are both taking Hurricane Bolters as well. From there, we have a pair of Custodian Wardens to attach those infantry characters, a big unit of Custodian Guards. We do have a Kyria Draxus to attach into them, pairs of Virtus Praetors, 2 units of 2 to attach the Dawn Eagle jet bike Shield Captains, as well as a Witch Seeker squad, a Calidus Assassin, some bodies added in the form of an Exaction squad to fill out the list with some additional utility, and then interestingly 2 units of Vigilators. Now the Vigilators are kind of an interesting inclusion here. With the access to +1 to hit, they go from hitting on 3s to hitting on 2s. And they actually, they're -1 to be hit as well, so they actually can do a little bit of damage, not to mention the fact that they are buffed by the stratagems that will affect both the Anathema Psychona and Adeptus Custodians units, so you get more use out of your dual stratagem expenditure on these guys in the list with their inclusion, which is sweet. So they can provide you some utility units that can also provide some late-game counterpunch as well, especially dealing with opposing utility units. I actually think Vigilators are probably a little underplayed. Their attack volume's relatively low, but you can buff them up pretty well, and they're pretty cheap for the output that you get, which is cool. So it's nice to see them seeing some play. Super interesting list from Snorre here. Definitely not one that we see too often with Adeptus Custodes, at least nowadays, and it's cool to see a lot of creativity this week. Now with that, we're going to move over to Necrons, who took down the BolterCon 2025. Adam Brule won that one with Awakened Dynasty. In fact, all of the Necron players this week that went undefeated were playing Awakened Dynasty, and in this case, we are playing some of the new units as well from the recent Kill Team drop. This includes Orokin the Diviner, 2 Hexmark Destroyers. The nice thing about them is they're able to drop into an aggressive position, get some work done, get some overwatches, and some reactive fire, and then they can respawn once destroyed with Protocol of the Eternal Revenant, which will help them help you continue to do some utility work as the game goes on. We have a Royal Warden with Nether Realm Casket, so that's stealth for the unit, plus a pair of Technomancers. From there, we have a unit of 20 Necron warriors, so we're going to be able to attach with the Royal Warden and Orican the Diviner for -1 to hit and a 4+ feel no pain to the Necron warriors. We also have a unit of Canoptek Tomb Stalkers. Now, that's the only Canoptek attachment unit that we have. There is a couple of different interesting places they could go, potentially into the Necron warrior unit to flesh them out. They could also be sitting in with the Canoptek Wraiths as well. But for those who don't know, these guys are basically a little bit of a side grade from Crypto Thralls. They have basically the exact same profile. They're a little bit better in melee, I believe, because I think they have slightly more attacks. They're a little bit better in ranged because they have slightly more attacks. And they give the ability to ignore modifiers with ranged attacks, assuming that you target something within 12 inches. It can affect things like the Necron warriors that are attacking with Gauss Reapers, so they're attacking at close range anyway, and you're going to get that benefit from the Tomb Crawlers, which just generally I think is more useful than the ability you get from the Crypto Thralls, at least in this particular situation. Plus, they do the same thing that Crypto Thralls do, where they're going to be able to flesh out the unit with a slightly larger unit size and some high-value bodies that you can potentially put wounds on. From there, we have 2 units of Canoptek Wraiths for the Technomancers to hop into, a Canoptek Reanimator to buff up the reactive reanimation effects that we have from Awakened Dynasty, 3 Doomsday Arcs, as well as a Ghost Arc for the additional reanimation rolls. This is basically Necron good stuff, I think. At its heart, we have an incredible front line of the Necron Warrior Brick that's almost unkillable, plus a pair of Canoptek Wraith units that are already incredibly difficult to deal with, backing that up with all of the reanimation effects and 3 Doomsday Arcs to clear out heavy targets. So pretty standard Necron fare. So with that, let's move over to Drukhari, who had 2 undefeated results this week, both of them with Spectacle of Spite. And we're going to go ahead and talk about the Boise Diamond Series GT. This was won by Trenton Bates, who went 5-0 with this detachment. This included an Archon, as well as Drazar, Lady Malice, Lilith Hesprax, and a standard Succubus. Now, for those who don't know, this particular detachment gives you special bonuses to your Witch Cult units. This can either be rolled for randomly, in which case you'll get 2 bonuses, or you can select them during your command phase, but you can only select each bonus once per game. This includes an additional attack, extra movement, extra weapon skill, ballistic skill, toughness, or strength on your melee weapons. Now, this is a huge buff for a lot of the more specialist witch units. Things like Hellions and Reavers are incredibly strong at a baseline, but also with this bonus is incredibly effective. So we have a unit of 10 Cabalite Warriors alongside 2 units of 10 Witches. We have 3 Venoms as well as 2 Raiders. So we do have the opportunity to attach a full big 10 model squad into one of those Raiders. In addition, we can also combat squad the Witch units out into the Venoms as well. So we have a lot of potential utility units running around. We then have a Chronos to do some pain token regeneration. That is particularly important in this detachment because we could do things like get advance and charge rerolls plus advance and charge thanks to the Witches empowerment. So being able to empower ourselves to get into melee is always going to be important. We have 2 units of 5 Incubi. Now, I think these are going to attach to the Archon and Lady Malice. They do have good leadership buffs for those Incubi. We have a pair of Reaver Jetbike squads. That's a full 6 in each of those Reaver squads. A 10 model Hellion squad. Now, these guys with those Spectacle of Spite bonuses active hit ridiculously hard. They're also incredibly fast. So this is going to be sort of one of the big hammer blow units of the army, plus a pair of Dark Lance Scourge heavy weapon teams. So we have an enormous number of fast utility units inside the Venoms between the Cabalite Warriors and the Witch squads that we can combat squad all 3 of those to get 6 OC2 utility units. The Witches themselves are incredibly fast. They get hit relatively hard with Succubus and Lilith Hesprax attached. And then we have the Incubi that can also sort of follow things up in melee to hit heavier targets. Drazar, Lady Malice can buff those up, as well as potentially the Archon. Drazar sometimes rocks by himself. Because his +1 to wound effect is now an empowerment ability, it works on both him and the Incubi, but it also could just be used on himself, Drazar himself. So he doesn't necessarily need an Incubus unit to attach to anymore like he did previously to get his leadership buffs. So he could be played on his own or with the unit either way. I'm not 100% sure how he was in this particular list, but makes sense this build is going to be a relatively strong one, especially given the stratagems that it has access to, things like the ability to charge at the end of your opponent's movement phase in order to disrupt opponent's control of objectives or disrupt their potential shooting, makes this army difficult to play against. And then also you're going to be spreading all around the table with all these utility units that are also going to make you effective at scoring. Now, with that, we'll move over to Du Bois GT. This saw Travis King go undefeated with Adeptus Mechanicus, playing a Skitarii Hunter cohort. A little different than the endless cavalcade of Hailoscreed battleclades we've been seeing previously. But in this case, Travis was playing Belisarius Call as well as a Skitarii Marshal with Cantic Thrallnet that allows him to turn on all of his Doctrina Imperative abilities on one of his units, which is typically an Iron Strider Belisari unit. So you can do things like turn your army into the Conqueror Imperative to advance and shoot, and then also turn on Protector Imperative for one of those Iron Strider units to get the +1 to hit on those guys. We then have 2 units of Skitarii Rangers, 3 units of 3 Iron Strider Belisari for long-range anti-tank, and then an absolute insane number of Sicarian profiles, as we are wont to do in Adeptus Mechanicus right now. That includes 30 Taraxi Skystalkers, as well as 25 Infiltrators and a unit of Sicarian Rust Stalkers. We do obviously have the ability to advance and charge in this detachment, which can supercharge the Sicarian Rust Stalkers, and then we're just going to absolutely dominate the center of the table with all of these Taraxi units. They all get stealth from the detached ability. They have access to a 5+ Feel No Pain, so they're difficult to take down, and then they can sort of gum up the middle of the table while your Iron Strider Belisari just clear out your opponent's heavy armored stuff. Not to mention the fact that you do have enough random ranged attacks from the flechette blasters on everything that you are able to clear out infantry relatively consistent. It's a high armor save infantry can be tough, but you do get a volume of attacks that is great enough to slowly chew them down. Now from there, we're moving over to one of the other large events of the weekend, the Show Me Showdown, where Aaron Hermstedt went 7-0 to go undefeated at that event with a Death Guard Virulent Vectorium. This includes a Demon Prince of Nurgle with Revolting Regeneration, so he's going to get that Feel No Pain. We have a Lord of Contagion with a Demon Weapon, plus a Lord of Virulence and Mortarion, the great man himself, making a reappearance. We have a kind of standard loadout of Death Guard units here, 2 units of Death Shroud Terminators to attach Terminator Lords. We have a Fetid Bloat Drone, a single Flesh Mower guy to act as a utility unit, in addition to 3 units of Poxwalkers, and then a bunch of additional Bloat Drone units. That includes 3 Heavy Blight Launcher Bloat Drones, so we're going to be able to make use of the Lord of Virulence's reroll hits ability on those guys, plus a pair of Myphitic Blight Haulers for some anti-tank. I think mostly we are just going to be sort of bullying up the middle of the table with Mortarion. Because he's a deep striker, you can do things like rapid ingress him in order to get him into aggressive positions on the table, potentially on objectives if your opponent isn't screening you out, and then you can use him to deliver Contagions of Nurgle to enemies to then turn on your Death Shroud Terminator close deep strike abilities and kind of use him to roll the attrition game in your favor as a little bit of an alpha strike, and then you're backing that up with a lot of really powerful shooting from all the Fetid Bloat Drones backed up by that Demon Prince. With that, we'll move over to some of the events that had only a single undefeated, starting with some Space Marine lists. Let's talk about Blood Angels. Georgios Floros went undefeated at the Athens Warlord 2, playing Angelic Inheritors. This included 3 jump pack captains, all of those with plasma pistols and power fists, alongside Commander Dante, a lieutenant with combi weapon with the Ordained Sacrifice, so he's going to be able to respawn when destroyed, and the Sanguinor, the great man himself. We had a single Ball Predator, which is interesting, to clear out some infantry in the early game, a single unit of Jump Pack Assault Intercessors, plus 2 Gladiator Lancers for some backline shooting, an Inceptor Squad with Plasma Exterminators. Nice thing about these guys is that they are Jump Pack keyworded, so they do get all of the Jump Pack synergies we get in Angelic Inheritors, especially the ability to go into Reserve, top of 1, and then bottom of 1 Deep Strike on enemies to Alpha Strike them. That can be hugely powerful in this detachment. Plus, it's because the Angelic Inheritors doesn't tend to need Oaths of Moment particularly greatly, we can basically always Oath of Moment whatever the Inceptor Squad is shooting at, so it's going to get full hit and rerolls. The Gladiator Lancers have floating rerolls on themselves, and any of the character-equipped units can get rerolls baked in, reroll ones to hit, so they don't necessarily need any additional rerolls there. We have 2 Infiltrator Squads to hold down the backline, in addition to a Scout Squad and 3 units of 3 Sanguinary Guard for the captain to attach into. Although I think one of them might be for Dante, and then one of the captains can hop into the Assault Intercessor Squad with jump packs to be a little bit of a cheaper trading unit. Pretty cool build coming out of Angelic Inheritors here. It's nice to see all of the individual characters seeing some play, and especially given the fact that how effective these guys are in an MSU build is with their 2+ ballistic, 2+ weapon skill, Sanguinary Guard, plus the character characters getting reroll once they hit, and the ability to fall back and charge potentially, which makes them very flexible. If they survive for a turn in combat, they're able to skirmish pretty effectively over the midboard, and then you can use Oath of Moment basically entirely to back up the ranged attacks. So you get relatively effective ranged attacks out of that as well. Now we'll move over to the GUTI Majestic Beasties 5. This was won by Brendan Krusty, who took it down with the Gladius Task Force build. This is going to look very similar to a lot of Gladius Task Force style of arms seen previously. This includes Chaplain Grimaldus, which is cool. He's going to be attaching into a big Assault Intercessor squad, so he gives them +1 to advance and charge, makes the squad relatively fast when you are activating Assault Doctrine on those guys. We have a trio of Castellan and Martial combos, so obviously we're going to be getting reroll hits from the Castellans, critical 5-ups from the Marshals. They all have lethal hits, and then they can attach into a unit of Sword Brethren who also have lethal hits, so they full hit and wound reroll and blow people up with stabbing swords and stuff. We then have an Emperor's Champion with the Honor Vehement, another Assault Intercessor squad to carry that guy around. We have some interesting inclusions. We have a standard Intercessor squad to hold down the back line, as well as a 3-model Blade Guard Veteran squad, which is curious. The Blade Guard Veterans don't have a ton of utility inside Black Templars. A lot of their characters don't attach to them, so I think they're just going to be hanging out by themselves. But they do get the Templar Vow abilities, so they are going to be able to get +1 to wound, targeting things with high toughness. So they might be able to get some work done by themselves. And as a utility unit inside one of the transports in the army, they're relatively effective. But other than that, they don't really have any particular synergy. We have a single Scout squad, 3 units of Sword Brethren to attach the Castellan and Martial combos, and then transports for all of those units. That includes 1 Impulsor and 2 Repulsor Executioners. Those ones obviously getting the hit rerolls for being the Black Templar variety. So one of these units is going to have to ground pound, one of the 5-mans. The Chaplain Grimaldus' squad always ground pounds, and then we're able to put 3 transports up into an aggressive position to then cycle units in and out of them using all the reacts. We can use the Sword Brethren reactive move when you fall back from them, plus the Gladius Task Force reactive move, and cycle in and out of those transports by running back in after the opponent finishes that movement. Now with that, we're going to move back to the boys and talk about the eventual winning list of the event, that being Neil Burns Morales Astra Militarum Combined Arms. The event had 3 undefeated players, as we talked about before, but this one was the one that placed first based on tiebreakers. This includes a Gaunt's Ghost unit, as well as a unit, Acadian Command Squad, with the Death Mask of Olanius to keep those guys at OC1, even if they are battle shocked. We then have 2 Rogaldorn tank commanders, no enhancements on those guys, and a Tech Priest Engine Seer, so we can grant them an invulnerable save. We then have a big unit of 20 Cadian Shock Troopers, plus 2 units of 10 Death Corps of Krieg, a couple of Bulgrin squads, 1 unit of 6, as well as a unit of 3 to hold down the midboard, some early game aggression from a Kazarkin squad, as well as a Rattling unit, plus 1 standard Rogaldorn, 1 standard Leman Russ, and a Torox to carry the Kazarkin around in, so they can push up early with Scout on that thing. We'll go ahead and round out coverage from Du Bois by talking about the 3rd place placing list, that being John Davison, who is taking Tau Empire in a Retaliation Cadre, the battlesuit-focused attachment. This includes Commander Farsight, a Cold Star Commander battlesuit, that one equipped with Cyclic Ion Blasters and Burst Cannons, plus another Fusion Blaster equipped Cold Star battlesuit with internal grenade racks, so he can deal some mortal wounds while moving. We have an Enforcer Commander with Starflare Ignition System, that guy including missile pods and a Cyclic Ion Blaster, Dark Strider to screen out the backline, plus a Firesight team for some additional midboard spawning. We have a Fire Knife battlesuit team. That's for the Enforcer Commander to hop into with missile pods. We have a pair of Star Scythe battlesuit teams, one of them equipped with flamers, one of them equipped with burst cannons for the Cold Star Commander to hop into. In addition to a Sunforge battlesuit team with Fusion Blasters, that one for the Fusion Blaster equipped Cold Star battlesuit to hop into, and Farsight can hop into the Flamer equipped Star Scythe unit. We then have a Kroot Carnivore squad for some OBSEC early game, a Pathfinder team, as well as a pair of Piranhas, 3 Riptide battlesuits, and a pair of Stealth battlesuit teams as well. Now with that, we have Adepta Sororitas returning to what is a more standard build that we've seen from them this week with Hallowed Martyrs. We've seen a lot of play, especially at World Championships, from Champions of Faith, but it seems like people are slowly moving back to the Hallowed Martyrs build. This was from Matthew Reeson at the Geekfest Arcs of Fire event. Matthew was playing a Canoness with the Mantle of Ophelia, Saga. That's auto 1 damage, incoming damage on that model. She also has, obviously, that automatic 2+ invulnerable save once per game, so she's going to be relatively difficult to kill. That's the only canoness, though, besides a jump pack canoness with Through Suffering Strength to act as a beat stick. We then have a Demonofuge, Junith Iroita for some additional command point generation, a Ministorum Priest with Saintly Example. Sometimes we see this played on the canoness, but instead the canoness is going to be doing the Mantle of Ophelia stuff. But obviously this guy can run out, you lose him, potentially generate some miracle dice, and then can respawn him. We have Morven Val, as well as a single Battle Sister squad, a pair of Immolators, and a Rhino. We do have a unit of 10 Arcoflagellants that can get carried around in that Rhino, and then a Dominion squad. So we do have combat squads available for the Battle Sisters and the Dominions. Dominions all equipped with Melta-Guns, and we can put the 5 model heavy weapon groups from those squads into the Immolators to push them up the table and deliver the short-range weapons. We have a 10 model Repentia squad. I guess that's actually probably where the the Rhino is going to be carrying them around. But one thing that we can do potentially is use the Rhino to slingshot either the Arcoflagellants or the Repentia, and then just simply reload it with the second unit. The Repentia do get kind of a nice buff from taking wounds, which they will often do on the way in because they are relatively easy to kill. They do get full hit and wound rerolls already, so there's it's not necessary to use things like Righteous Vengeance to get those. But if they get +1 to hit or +1 to wound, and the same thing goes largely for the Arcoflagellants as well. If you lose a single model out of that to get the +1 to hit bonus from Hallowed Martyrs, it actually wildly improves their damage output. And +1 to wound as well could potentially go a long way. Also, there's pretty solid kind of late game counterpunch. We then have a Zephyrim squad, in addition to a pair of Castigators, those both equipped with battle cannons for long-range firepower. And with that, we'll move over to the 40k Iron Man event. Again, a one-day event. This one was won by Aeldar, being led by Tymon Josefowski, who is playing an Aspect host. Now, a lot of the stuff is going to be relatively self-explanatory. We've seen most of these similar things before. This includes Asherman, Behareth, Eldrad for early game command point generation, so we can fuel a big attack and then also use Skyborn Sanctuary on the first battle round, potentially, if you go first. In addition to Fuegan, Janezar, Lycus, and interestingly, an Autarch Wayleaper. Now, it's all the character combinations that we know and love. Janezar for Howling Banshees, Lycus for a Warp Spider unit to give them Flicker, Jump, and Charge. Fuegan for a big Fire Dragon brick. There's 10 Fire Dragons in the army, plus Asherman for a unit of 5 Dire Avengers. There is a Falcon in the army, so Asherman can hop into the Falcon, get fire supported for his devastating wounds, and then hop back into the Falcon after shooting. We have a unit of 10 Storm Guardians, or 11, I guess, once you include the Serpent Scale platform. And it's likely that Eldrad is attaching into the Storm Guardians because we do have a Warlock Conclave in the army as well, so they're going to be able to dual attach with Eldrad to then provide -1 to wound to the unit. So it's a relatively good late game piece. They can obsec the home objective and then push in late game to put high OC units onto the center of the table in order to win sort of bottom of the game. And the Warlock Conclave gives them a little bit of additional damage output while also being tough to take down with a built-in invulnerable save in addition to that -1 to wound effect. We then have a Swooping Hawk unit in addition to a Warp Spider unit, 1 unit of 5 Rangers, a pair of 5 model Warp Spider units, and a 10 model Howling Banshee squad where Janezar is going to be hanging out with. That lets you do a lot of really interesting stuff with Janezar. The 10 model squad lets you do things like use the 6-inch pylon consolidate battle focus ability to slingshot Janezar into really weird places your opponent might not be expecting. You could use the Howling Banshees, for example, to kill 1 unit and then sling Janezar into another unit with a character, use her full rerolls to then kill the character alongside Aspect Shrine tokens, and it's kind of 2 for 1 your opponent using that. Much harder to do with the 5 model units because you don't have as many models to manipulate your board presence, but on the 10 model units, it is much easier. The one interesting thing is the Wayleaper in here. I'm not actually 100% sure where it's going. It might be in the Swooping Hawks, maybe, because he can attach in there, but he's running a Dragon Fusion gun as well as a Banshee Blade, so he does have some damage output and use of the Aspect Shrine token inside one of the either Warp Spider or Swooping Hawk units on that Dragon Fusion gun, where they otherwise wouldn't necessarily get a ton of use out of it. Now, with that, we'll move on to Egoitz Aegilor, who also went undefeated at the Open Pusela War Games. This was a 5-0 list that took second place based on tiebreakers, but was playing a interesting Shadow Legion build out of Chaos Demons. Now, this is an interesting kind of like non-interaction build. That's because it's taking Be'lakor as well as a Bloodthirster. Now, this is the detachment that lets you take Chaos Space Marine Infantry in addition to your normal demons. The Bloodthirster here is running Fate to Darkness, so after he kills something in melee, he's able to go into Strategic Reserve, and then he can advance and charge. There's a stratagem for +1 to lance in melee for that guy, so he's relatively consistent once he gets into the fight. And then we're taking a bunch of resilient stuff for the midboard. We have a Beast of Nurgle, who's going to get a transhuman effect, -1 to be wounded if your strength is higher than his toughness, in addition to 2 units of Flamers and a trio of 6 model Screamer units. All of those get -1 to be hit permanently, and you can use, and there's a stratagem to return models back to those units over the course of the game to keep them topped up. So they can be very difficult to engage with. We then have a Fleshhound unit for some utility, as well as a Nurgling unit for early game for midboard control. In addition to a Cultist mob, so we can hold down the back line. 2 units of Raptors, which are another nice inclusion just for utility purposes. Another thing that this army does is that it does have an up-down strat for demons, so it's able to do things like port the Flamers, for example, into annoying places, but it targets an additional Chaos Space Marine unit if you have them. So you can be deep striking things like Flamers and Screamers all around the table constantly. You can constantly just be bouncing those guys into reserve 2 units at a time, which is an incredible amount of utility. Now, speaking of bouncing into reserve, we also have a unit of 10 Warp Talons. So we do, in addition, have the Bloodthirster, which can return into reserve after it kills something, and the Warp Talons can also do the same thing. So we have 2 units that could potentially be fighting and then jumping away. The rest of the army on the table is very difficult to engage with. It has an 18-inch lone operative thanks to Bellicor if it's near them, and they can regenerate. They have a lot of wounds. They have 4+ invulnerable saves on the Tzeentch demons and are -1 to be hit. So you don't expose too many of that until you need to, and then and you just constantly try to set up situations where you can use the Warp Talons to clear enemy utility units, bounce them into the sky, rapid ingress them, do it again. If your opponent ever gives you the opportunity, you can also do it with the Bloodthirster, and you can be taking pieces from them the entire game without actually exposing any of your army until such time as you need to take the board, in which case you burst out with all these Screamers and all of these annoying to kill demon units and try to get Bellicor into the mix as well. Really interesting build. One of the first times I've seen the 10 model Warp Talon unit being used in this way, but definitely makes sense alongside the Bloodthirster. Having 2 threats that can do that is incredibly powerful. Now, with that, we're going to move over to RetCon 2025. This was a large event, over 100 players, a major level event, but only ran 5 rounds. So it's going to have a lot of undefeated, and we'll talk about all of them here. That starts with Dean Sinbeck, the first place placer, playing World Eaters. Interesting thing about these lists, too, is that we haven't actually talked about any of them earlier in the video, so we get some new factions in there. This includes, this was a Berserker Warband featuring a Demon Prince of Khorne, Karn the Betrayer, and a Slaughterbound with Berserker Glaive. We have a single unit of Khorne Berserkers to attach with Karn inside a Rhino, 3 units of Chaos Spawn for utility, 2 units of 8-bound and an Exalted 8-bound for some counterpunch, 2 Forge Fiends to add some shooting, a Jackal unit to hold down the back line, as well as a pair of Helbrutes. So we have that late game threat as well of the Helbrutes just popping out, getting that charge bonus for the detachment, Berserker Warband detachment ability, and then bouncing around the opponent's army and beating them to death as they kind of collapse into trying to deal with the 8-bound and the Khorne Berserkers that are already threatening the midboard. From there, we can move on to Cody Klepton, who was running a fascinating orc list. This was the Big Hunt, the Beast Snaga focus list that tells you to choose a prey target in your command phase, and you get a bunch of bonuses against them, extra AP and charge rerolls for your Beast Snagas. In this case, you're playing a pair of Beast Bosses, a Beast Boss and Squigosaur with Surly as a Squigoth that gives him his whole unit a -1 to wound if the strength characteristic is greater than your toughness effect, so like a transhuman effect. We have Boss Snickrot as well as Mozrog Scragbad, the Grey Man himself. 2 units of Beast Snaga boys to attach to the Beast Bosses, as well as a standard unit of boys just to hold down the back line with Obsec. We have a Gorkanaut, which can carry some of those around on the table, which is kind of fun. A Gretchen unit, as well as a pair of Kill Rigs. That's going to be able to carry around the Beast Snaga boys, so I guess the Gorkanaut's probably there for the regular boys squad, as well as a pair of Squigog boys to attach the 2 Squigosaur war bosses, Mozrog Scragbad and the Squigosaur war boss. Now, in addition to that, we also saw at 3rd place here, Marcus Butler took down a 5-0 record with Hearthband Leagues of Votann. Obviously, this detachment getting a lot of play recently. This includes an Einherjar Champion, a Call with the Bastion Shield, so -1 AP to stuff nearby him, as well as Uthar the Destined. We have a single Hearthkin Warrior unit. No Sagittars in the list, so we are just going to be rocking those guys around the table, the full 10-man. plus a Capricus Carrier to take around a unit of Hernkin Jaegers. We have a single unit of Hernkin Pioneers to act as some additional forward operation with their scout move. We have 2 Hekaton Land Fortresses. Those guys could carry some combination of the 5-man Einhir Hearthguard, 3-man Brokir Thunderkin, and 1 5-man Chthonian Berserk unit. We do have a unit of Chthonian Earthshakers for the backline, as well as a big 10-man of Einhir Hearthguard to attach in the Bastion's Shield character to keep them safe. And with that, last but certainly not least, we have an incredibly spicy list. This one coming from Chaos Space Marines, going 4th place at RatCon. This is Ryan Jones playing Dread Talons. Now, for those who don't know, which is probably a lot of you, because I don't think I've ever seen this detachment played even once, this is the Battle-Shocked focused detachment for Chaos Space Marines. It basically gives a Death Leaper aura, take a Battle Shock check if you're below starting strength in the Battle Shock step, to everything within 12 inches of any Heretic Astartes unit from your army. In addition to that, you also get -1 to Battle Shock checks while you're in that distance, and you can unlock a bunch of bonuses when you target Battle Shocked enemies, which includes things like Pitiless Hunters that gives you hit and wound rerolls against things that are Battle Shock. Now, in this case, we are taking a Chaos Lord with Will Breaker. This forces enemies that are hit by him in the fight phase to take Battle Shock tests. We're sensing a theme here. We have Cypher, as well as a Dark Commune, a single Cultist Mob, a unit of Legionaries to attach with that Chaos Lord, give him wound rerolls on his big cool hammer. We have a Chaos Rhino to carry them around, 1 standard biker squad in addition to an accursed cultist unit, a Predator Destructor, las cannon sponsons, and an autocannon on the turret, in addition to a Vindicator and a pair of Obliterators. We then have 2 units of Raptors and a unit of Warp Talons, plus a Noise Marine squad coming out of Emperor's Children. Now, there's a 6-inch deep strike strat for jump pack infantry from this detachment. You can't charge out of it, but it does force additional Battle Shock checks, so you can use it to potentially flip objective, which is kind of sweet. The other thing, too, is that your infantry also get a reactive charge against enemies falling back from them, so having these units of jump pack infantry that can hop over everywhere and engage things that enforce those, enemy ranged attackers to fall back potentially and then re-engage them is a huge deal. And that is, in fairness, only a 1 CP strat, so that's actually kind of scary. And then the other thing is that the Noise Marines are actually incredibly synergistic with this detachment. They do grant a -1 to Battle Shock tests until the start of your next shooting phase, each time they shoot something in your own shooting phase. So you're going to be potentially forcing -1 to all the Battle Shock checks that you force either through your stratagems or abilities or through the detachment ability to whatever the Noise Marines shoot. It is select 1 enemy unit, so you only get to do it to 1 thing, but it can help to confirm that you're going to be Battle Shocking particular enemy units that are like holding down the midboard, for example. Let's say there's a big brick of the enemies on the middle of the table. You can't kill it, but we can kill a couple models out of the unit and then force a Battle Shock check on them, potentially at up to -2, thanks to the detachment ability plus the Noise Marine effect, which has a pretty solid chance of failing. There's also a unit of 10 Warp Talons in this one too, to round things out and add another big punching unit to the army. Absolutely insane list, by the way. Not a lot of people playing Dread Talons right now, so that's absolutely insane to see. But with that, those are all the best armies in Warhammer 40k for this week. Thanks everyone for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks everyone who supports Tactical whether that's over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise. YouTube channel members and Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing, and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.